I'm Ben Meiselas from Legal AF, joined by co-host Karen Friedman Agnifilo. Big news to report in the Fulton County sprawling RICO criminal case against Donald Trump and 18 co-defendants. We had seen before a number of Donald Trump's co-defendants waiving their arraignment and through a pleading entering their not guilty plea, meaning they're not going to have to show up. They're not going to have to hear the reading of the RICO complaint in court, and that they are informing the court that they have been informed of all of their rights by their counsel, and they are waiving the arraignment process. Donald Trump has entered his plea of not guilty and waived his appearance at the arraignment, which was scheduled for September 6th, which means even though cameras would be allowed in the courtroom, Donald Trump will not be showing up for that arraignment. He consistently in this pleading refers to himself over and over again as President Donald Trump through his counsel, which again, to me, is offensive. You can say former President or just defendant Donald Trump, just so we can be accurate here. And if the title's labeled President Trump's entry of plea of not guilty. But Karen, you've been to probably more arraignments than you could even estimate how many. Walk us through this process here. I know it's different in different states, but what does this mean right here now that Donald Trump has entered his not guilty plea via this pleading rather than showing up in court?
So arraignment is really a very important part of the process. It's the beginning of any case. It's the beginning where you go to court for the first time, you meet a judge for the first time, you're told what the charges are, even if you don't have them read to you, which is your right. You have the right to have the full charges read to you. Most defendants will waive the reading of the rights, but they don't waive the rights thereunder. And that's a phrase that defense attorneys usually use. And, it's the first time you see a judge so it's a very important part and beginning of the process, because up until that point, criminal defendants, they might have been arrested, they might have been indicted, but they haven't been formally arraigned. And it's what makes you a defendant, right? It's where the judge also tells you what your release conditions will be. I know that Donald Trump, like the other defendants here, signed his bond agreement in advance and the conditions were there. But normally what a judge would do is make sure that the defendant understands them and make sure that they understand what could happen if they violate any of those release conditions. So they also talk about, are there any notices that have to be given? Because prosecutors statutorily are under obligation, again, depending on what jurisdiction you're in, to give certain notices. And some of them are right around the time of arraignment. So things like statements that will be used, that statements that were made by the defendant that will be used against you at trial, or any identification procedures that were made, or that this case might be superseded in the grand jury, or there's plenty of notices, of statutory notices that prosecutors are under an obligation to give the defendant. That usually happens at an arraignment. The other thing that happens at an arraignment typically is the defendant will, and the prosecutor will talk about a schedule, what's going to happen next, and what are the type, like let's either set a trial date or let's set over a date for motion practice so that we can file motions. But it's an arraignment, although it's ceremonial in a way and not usually substantive in the sense that there's no trial, there's no hearing, there's no witnesses that get called. It's a very important beginning of the process. It shows the gravity of the charges. I think it's important for everybody, for all parties, including defendants, to go and they see a judge and they know exactly what's going on and what is required of them. But here he waived it, and he signed this waiver where he entered a plea of not guilty, and then he did his Sharpie signature as usual, and it says President Donald Trump, as you said, Ben. That's his part of his signature.
Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a skill-based, real money daily fantasy sports game. How does it work? You pick 2 to 6 players, and if they will go more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. At Prize Picks, you aren't competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks. As you know, I'm a competitive person by nature, and combining my competitiveness with an easily accessible daily fantasy sports game, that's the icing on the cake for me. With the Major League Baseball season about to head into playoff season and football season, both college and pro, getting going, and I love college football, I can put my skill-based knowledge to the test with daily entries with incredible winnings. So you know, Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. This includes NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, women's college basketball, soccer, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, disc golf, Euro basketball, cricket, and many, many more. Prize Picks is currently operational in over 30 states and Canada, not Ontario. Go to prizepicks.com/Meidas and use code Meidas for a first deposit match up to $100. That's PrizePicks, PrizePicks.com/Meidas, and use code Meidas for a first deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy at Prize Picks.
He entered a not guilty plea. And what that means is when anybody is arraigned, the judge will say, Defendant Donald Trump, you have been indicted on 13 counts by the people of the state of Georgia, and count 1 is RICO under Georgia statute, whatever it is, 17 dash, I can't remember off the top of my head, and then the judge says, how you have been charged with this crime, how do you plead? And a defendant is required to enter a plea. And so the judge will know, are we moving? How are we proceeding? And in felonies, typically, almost 100% of the time, defendants will enter a plea of not guilty. And that is because they are going to want to have the case proceed against them. Sometimes in misdemeanors, a defendant will plead guilty at arraignment and get rid of the case with some kind of either time served or community service or that sort of thing. But really felonies are typically, they enter a plea of not guilty, and then the case proceeds from there. So the fact that he didn't appear is surprising to me, that this is how Georgia does it, that he's not going to see the judge and see the court, that he was able to turn himself in and be in custody for all of a big hour, get his fingerprints read. And there's really been no formal situation where a judge has told him what's required of him. And the reason I think that's complicated is, let's say he violates his release conditions. He could easily, this sets him up to be able to say, oh, well, I didn't really understand what you meant, and I think it's important to see a judge, and I think it's important for judges to be able to tell defendants what exactly is expected of them, and to also show how important this is and how serious any criminal charge is in any case. So that's what this is. We'll see, this document, in this document that he filed, Trump acknowledges receipt of the indictment. He waived his right to appear personally. He said he understood the nature of his rights. His attorney, Steve Sadow, said that he explained his rights to him, and that he voluntarily waives his right to be present at the arraignment. So we're not going to see him on the 6th the way we had thought we might, and he's not going to appear in court. And I think on the 6th, the judge will then set a schedule, and we'll know when we will see Donald Trump in court again to face these charges.
And again, he's not getting special treatment in this situation. The other co-defendants have also been able to waive their arraignment and enter not guilty pleas via the pleading paper, like you just saw. And this is something that other defendants in Georgia, in other cases, in other circumstances, can avail themselves to. So it's not like a special situation here. One of the interesting things that I think is a positive development in this, and we'll be doing a whole nother hot take on this as well, and the media has not really been focused on this yet, is remember, Donald Trump filed this $500 million civil case against his former attorney, Michael Cohen, in federal court, making all of these various kind of frivolous allegations. But Michael Cohen set Donald Trump's deposition for September 6th. And one of the things that was potentially concerning is Cohen's been fighting to have that deposition date. Donald Trump's been trying to avoid it. The court ordered that it take place. And if Donald Trump was going to show up to his arraignment in Fulton County, Georgia, the deposition that Cohen had been planning and scheduling for so long of Donald Trump would have to be moved. And I think it's a big deal because Cohen's going to be focusing on, what Donald Trump is suing Michael Cohen for is so broad in its scope and says that Cohen's lied about everything. So I think when Cohen shows up, it goes to Donald Trump, what do you think I'm lying about? And see if Donald Trump invokes his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination there, or if evidence is able to be developed there just by the nature of what Trump's asserting against Cohen that is of interest in the various other cases that Donald Trump is a criminal defendant in or a civil defendant in. So we'll be talking about that more. Everybody, make sure you subscribe to Legal AF wherever you get audio podcasts. If you want to learn more about Karen Friedman Agnifilo's origin story, make sure you check it out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch. We do a great after show that features Karen on that. And check out MeidasTouch.com for all the latest breaking news. Have a good one. We'll see you next time on a Karen and Ben duet.
Hey, Meidas Mighty. Love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.